Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here with another sewing video, and in this video we're going to be going over the Box X stitch. Now the Box X stitch is normally used on webbing to hold pieces of webbing together, like on a backpack or something where you need strength. In today's sewing project, to show you the example of the stitch, we're going to be making this simple holster here, which doesn't really need any strength, but I will show you the formula to figure out how big of a Box X you need. So, thread that I'm using is 69 or T70, and it has a strength of around 11 pounds, and you can look this up online and determine what thread you need. Now the needle you want to use for this thread will be a size 100/16 or 110/18, and usually on packages of needles it has the size listed. So this is the 110/18, and then these numbers up here correspond to the length and design of the needle, and these are machine specific, so you want to get the ones that you need for your machine. And here is the 100/16 size, so either one of those will work with this thread. Now the Box X stitch, the pattern we want to sew is, let's say you have an overlap of webbing, so this dotted line is the other piece of webbing underneath this piece, and basically you want to come here about an 1/8 inch in from the edge, stitch till you get to an 1/8 inch from this edge, stitch, and you want to start on this short leg first, and this will also help hold the two pieces together in place. Come up this short edge, and at this point you want to do your diagonal, and when you get down here you're going to try to stick the end of this stitch right in this corner. So right here where you turn the corner, you should have a stitch hole and then another stitch going off this way, and then you come in and sink the end of the stitch right there. And the reason you start on this short leg is because you are going to have to retrace legs to finish out the stitch, and if you start on the long leg, when you come back around you'd have to retrace the whole long leg. Here, once you hit this corner, you turn, come up, retrace the short leg, do your next diagonal, come up, retrace this short leg over here, and then come down this long leg. So basically you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 legs. And don't forget, here you want to lock in this area when you start and lock in this area when you end. Okay, so if you need more strength than this Box X, you can do a double Box X. And basically you would start somewhere, stitch, so this is number 1, do your diagonal, so that's number 2, do your next short leg, so that's 3, do your next diagonal, that's 4, and at this point we want to get the outside edges, so you would do your long edge for 5, another diagonal for 6, outside edge 7, and then your last diagonal for 8. Now basically your diagonals have been traced twice and your outside edges have only been sewn once. So now that you're here, you just go around the outside edge. Excuse me. There we go. So 9, 10, 11, 12. And of course, lock in the start here and the end here. So I drew these lines next to each other, but in reality, it would be stitched one on top of the other. So you got your 2 short edges and your diagonals. Now you go across the top, retrace the diagonal right over top of the original one, go across the bottom, retrace the diagonal, and now go all the way around the outside. So it would look like that, one line right on top of the other, and that would increase your strength. So how do we know what the strength of our stitching needs to be? How big of a box do we need? Well, there's a formula for that, and that comes back to this thread strength. So what you need to know is your stitches per inch, and that's usually done by getting a ruler and then counting how many stitches there are across an inch, and you can adjust that on your machine. So what you're aiming for on your box X stitch is about 8 to 12 stitches per inch. Well, okay. And then you're going to multiply that by the strength of your thread. In this case, our thread strength is about 11 pounds. And then you're going to multiply that by a ratio or a factor depending on what kind of stitch you're using. So it's 1.5 for a lock stitch and 1.7 for a chain stitch. If your machine has a bobbin, it's creating a lock stitch. If you have a machine that creates a chain stitch, you're going to know it. You're not going to accidentally buy one of these machines. Usually it's a type of machine that would be used on like creating seams on blue jeans. So on the outside it looks like a normal lock stitch, but on the inside it's not the same. So like on a lock stitch, both sides look the same. On a chain stitch, the top side might look like this, but the other side looks like something completely different that I can't quite describe. So that's your formula. So let's say I'm using 10 stitches per inch. My thread strength is 11 and 1.5 for my average loop strength ratio, which is this number here. That means I would need, or basically what that means is multiply that all out, I get 165 pounds per inch of seam. So let's say I have some webbing that can hold 1,000 pounds before it fails. Well, I just divide it by 1.65, or sorry, 165, and that means I need roughly a 6-inch seam for my sewn seam to match the strength of my webbing. Now that doesn't mean my box stitch has to be 6 inches. That means all of this stitching right here has to equal up to be 6 inches. So if we were doing 1-inch wide webbing and we came in off the edge 1/8 of an inch, that means these doubled up legs right here are going to be 0.75 inch across, and there's 4 of them. So 0.75 times 4 equals 3 inches. That means the length of my box stitch has to be 3 inches. And that 3 inches is this leg, and these two diagonals. Now you could sit down and figure out the hypotenuse and figure out what your base leg of this triangle needs to be, basically, that makes up these two triangles that make up this rectangle. But you could just make the math really easy, since you know these diagonals are going to be longer than this base leg. Just divide it by 4 and you'll come up with a safe number, which is 0.75. So this box stitch could be a nice perfect square on that 1-inch webbing. And like I said, if I had a limited amount of space, like lengthwise here, you could use this double box stitch. So your short legs are already doubled, they would remain 4, but now instead of dividing by whatever's left over by 4 here for the length, you would divide that by 8, which would equal 3/8 inch, whatever that is in decimal. So that's really too short of a box stitch, but that just gives you an example how when you do this double box stitch, it shortens the length that your box stitch needs to be. But none of that applies to this holster, because it's definitely going to be strong enough. And it's just an example to show you how the box stitch works. And mainly here what I'm doing is, with the way the holster's made, is I'm holding the fabric together with the box stitch. So I want to go around the outside and then also sew down the center to keep it all together close to one piece. And then also it's kind of holding on this Velcro. And that's one good thing for a box stitch, is you can sew on a piece of Velcro and it's going to hold down the Velcro in the center, instead of just having a big open area that's not secured. So when you put Velcro on here and peel it off, if you didn't have this center area secured, it'd want to pull up from the rest of the fabric, making it difficult to use. So for this project, if you want to sew it, you're going to need 2 2-inch tri-glides for your belt loops. And then if you use elastic, like I'm going to be using, you need 9.5 inches of 2-inch elastic. Or if you want to use actual webbing, you would need 12 inches of webbing, because the elastic provides some flex, but the webbing is solid, so you need that extra length to kind of accommodate the pistol. And then if you are going to be putting on a rigger's belt, then the belt has Velcro, and most of the time this goes back far enough around your waist from the buckle that it's going to overlap this holster. And that's what the Velcro is for, is to have it, while it's on the belt, the end of the belt would just lay over the top of this and stay Velcroed down. And so for that piece of Velcro, it's about 2.5 inches long, and the width is 2 inches to match the elastic or the webbing. And then if you want to add some sort of retention to the holster, you need a little 2-inch long piece of 1-inch webbing and 6 inches of 1/8 inch elastic cord. So here's my elastic. Like I said, 9.5 inches. If you're using webbing, you want to use 12 inches. And when you thread this into the buckles, you're basically going to create 3 layers of fabric, and you want them all to be about equal length. So the end of this piece, or this end inside here, is almost touching the buckle, and this end on the outside is almost touching the buckle. And if you were going to not use the Velcro, you could put the seam on the inside, so the good side of the buckle's out here with the solid piece. And you could do it theoretically with the Velcro on there too. And just basically once you have your pieces lined up correctly like that, you just take your piece of Velcro, put it on top, and you want to hold it all together as such as you put it into the sewing machine. And then you're going to start on this short edge. It's almost a square because it's 2.5 inches by 2 inches, but might as well not waste more thread than you need to. So we'll start on the short edge. That way also you get an idea of how a longer box X stitch would be sewn. And what's unique and difficult about this little project here when sewing the box X stitch is normally if you're sewing the stitch, it'd be connecting two ends of webbing together and there might not be anything there, but here you have these buckles that are going to interfere with the presser foot. And it's easy going the short edge along the buckle because you just ride the presser foot down along the edge of the buckle. But then when you turn the corner, your presser foot is longer than it is wide and it'll sit on top of this buckle. So you want to really control it as you start sewing so that the presser foot doesn't just slide off the buckle and create like a 2-inch long stitch. So I'll get the machine all set up, camera readjusted, and we'll sew the box X stitch. Okay, we've got our machine all set up and threaded. If you need to review how this is done, go ahead and go back to video 1 and watch that. And then also might be worth reviewing how to lock in stitches and stuff, but I mean we'll kind of cover it here. And you might notice I have a different presser foot on here. It's narrower. This is the one that came with this genome, and I believe it's for sewing zippers, getting up close to the zipper with the stitch, and I figured it would be great for getting in close to this buckle. So you come in 1/8 of an inch off the side of the fabric, put your needle down through the fabric, and then drop your presser foot. And then you're just going to sew 3 stitches up, 3 stitches back to lock it in. And more than 3 is okay, but you only need to really do 3. And then you just go all the way down the short edge until you get close to the edge, and then you want to hand walk it, be as accurate as possible to get it about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And if your stitches don't come out exactly 1/8 from the edge, you can lift your needle up, lift your presser foot, move your fabric just a little bit, and then put that needle down exactly 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then you'll want to turn the corner, drop your presser foot, and then continue sewing on the long edge. And this is where your presser foot's on top of this, so it's going to be really difficult for the machine to not want to slide off of that buckle. And I'm hand walking a little bit because of the buckle. It seems to be binding up just a little bit. There we go. Now that we're off the buckle, we'll sew as normal. And then again, for this corner, you want to sink that needle exactly 1/8 of an inch from the side. And you can draw this pattern out beforehand. Don't be afraid to put lines on here if you can't do it just by eyeball. And once you have your needle in there, pivot around the needle lower your pressure foot. So this was the short side, leg 1, the long side, leg 2. Now we're doing the next short side, leg 3. And again, lift the pressure foot and get that needle exactly on the ending spot that you want. And then now leg 4 is your diagonal. And this is where drawing lines helps a lot of people. Come across here, and as you get close, you want to hand walk that last little bit. And then if it's not going to drop into that corner where the two pieces of, or the 90-degree angle of the two legs meet, don't be afraid to lift that pressure foot and sink that needle right into that junction where the two corners meet. Which, just there, I managed to miss it, so we'll do one more stitch, get it exactly there, because when you turn this 90 degrees, you want to be lined up to come back up this short leg, your first leg, exactly over the stitches you already created. And not only does it look nice, but it also makes the box X stronger, because you don't have stitching just ending outside the box somewhere, which creates a concentration for a weak point. Right there, I'm having to hand walk this. I got off my line a little bit and I'm trying to get back on there. And then the other thing is, even though my needle is heavy enough, it is bending, and I'm worried that I might have dulled the needle, because it should not be bending like that, especially with the weight of the needle that I'm using. Anyway, you get to the corner just like before, and then you sew across the other diagonal. Back to operating normally for some reason. That was weird. Don't know why the needle started bending like that. There's not really anything that heavy duty that I'm sewing through, and the needle is heavy enough for this. Basically, as usual, when you get to that corner, reposition the fabric with the pressure foot up to stick your needle right back down through that exact corner. Turn, drop the pressure foot, and then go back down the short leg. leg right over the stitching you've already created. And then once you approach the last corner, make sure you lift the presser foot and stick that needle in exactly 1/8 inch from the edge. Turn 90 degrees and sew down for your last leg on the long edge. Oh man, what is going on with my machine? Done that before. I'm going to have to look at it more in depth after this video. Hopefully I can just get through it. It looks like maybe the needle plate has shifted. There we go. We'll at least finish that out. And as you come here, make sure you end exactly in that starting stitch. So as usual, pull up the presser foot, reposition the fabric as you send the needle down through the fabric, and then drop the presser foot and make sure to reverse to lock in your stitches. Maybe it's this presser foot throwing stuff off. But there we go. We've got enough stitching. Call this one good. The needle is hitting the needle plate, and it looks like this needle plate has shifted slightly from where it's supposed to be positioned. So that's the first problem I've had with this machine. But basically, pull out the project and then trim the thread off. Don't forget to leave enough here so it's not sucked back up in the machine next time you start sewing. And then, since your stitches are locked in, you can trim as close as you can to the fabric. You don't have to worry about your stitches coming out because they are locked down. They're not going anywhere. That's if you remembered to lock them down. So here, I'm off just a little bit, but that gives you an idea of how you need to come down to this corner. And right here where this point is, this junction, that's where that diagonal should end as well. And then you come back up here. I'm off just a little bit again, but you should sink the needle in that junction, that corner there, and then come up on your next diagonal. That's what you're aiming for anyway. So you can do this with the elastic, or with the Velcro loop on it for your belt, or you can do it without. It doesn't need to be on there. And like I said, it can be elastic like I've used here, or it can be webbing. If it's elastic, 9.5 inches. If it's webbing, 12 inches. And I'll have a list of materials down in the description, and hopefully I can find some links for you guys where you can go and buy this material. Last step is, if you want retention, you can add that. And the elastic for the retention is going to go in this inner loop of the tri-glide. If you put it on the outer loop, it's going to interfere with this being placed on your belt. And then basically, if you're right-handed, wearing it on the right side, you can have it in the front, or you can flip it over here and have it in the back. So on the front, it would kind of go over the slide of the pistol, and the back it would go over the pistol grip. Or you can wear this on your left side, and same thing. And for the top, these two loose ends, basically you just take this 2-inch long piece of webbing that's 1 inch wide, put about 1/2 inch of the ends up inside there, and then you just stitch down this and then stitch back up. Okay, so looked at the machine. I thought the needle plate was out of position, so I took that off, started looking at it, realized it was in the correct position, got down there and looked at my needle, and it was bent forward. So the front side there's to the right. So it was bent enough that it wasn't lined up with the hole in the needle plate for the needle, and it was jabbing that needle into the plate. It might have been bent before I started sewing, and I just got lucky until I wasn't. Bent needles happen sometimes. Usually I have to hit something like a zipper to get it to bend. What I was sewing here shouldn't bend it unless I clipped this buckle, but I really wasn't close to the buckle, so I can't imagine I bent it just sewing this. And so that's one reason you always want to have extra needles. I probably should have stopped in the middle of sewing that, but I was hoping to get through the project, and what I could have done was basically ended the stitch without locking it in, trim the thread, and then start a few stitches back, go over those stitches, and then also lock in the new stitching there, and those three together the new locked in stitches will also lock in the original stitching that you weren't able to lock in when you quit. And that's a good tip for, like, if you run out of bobbin thread, you can just trim your stitches. Be careful not to pull on the seam and unravel it. Thread a new bobbin onto the machine, and then go and start a few stitches back, sew over your original stitching, and then back up, lock in your new stitching, and that lock in will lock in both sets of stitching. Now on this, I forgot to put on my presser foot, and basically here is the normal presser foot on the right and the zipper presser foot on the left that I was using a second ago. And since I don't need that clearance right now, I'm just going to switch back to the original presser foot, and on this Genome they just clip right on there. It's real easy. So now, like I said, about 1/2 inch of cord inside the folded over webbing. And to make this easy, usually when I start this, I make sure to place the needle into the elastic cord. That way the presser foot isn't trying to climb up over the whole thickness of the cord, and it's not sliding around, separating, and just being difficult. And this should be easy, so we'll sew through this real quick, hopefully. Hand walk it just to be safe here, I guess. And then reverse over that same thread. There's going to be some weird cuts in this video. Hopefully you guys don't mind too much. Basically, my tripod keeps sliding out from underneath the camera that I'm using, and I can't get the legs to tension correctly right now for some reason. It's a 3D printed tripod, so not the best out there, but it is what I had available. Otherwise I wouldn't be making videos. And basically with this thread or this stitch, you just want to go back and forth across tab a few times. So go back and forth across this tab a few times, locking all the stitching down, and at the same time sewing the cord into the tab. And once that's done, you pull this out and trim all your thread down. This isn't my best stitching here, but I kept having to stop and grab the camera because it was falling off the tripod. So that's the tab to lock that down. Okay, so basically two ways to use this holster. One is you have the elastic tab on the back and it slips up over the pistol grip to retain the pistol. The other way to use it is you have the elastic cord on the front and it goes up over the rear of the slide like that to retain your pistol. Either way works, and like I said, it can be flipped into any orientation to allow it to work either right hand or left hand. And you also have this 2 inches here covering the trigger to keep that safe. So you could adjust it for different size pistols. This will work for just about any Beretta, SIG, 1911, Glock size frame. To make it smaller or larger, you'd obviously have to adjust the length of your webbing or elastic. And I don't know how small you could go with this. You really don't want to use like narrower than 2 inch though, because then it might not cover the trigger guard. Hope you liked the video. Please hit the like button if you do. Subscribe to see more sewing videos. Next video is going to be over doing the W or the double W stitch. So I'll show like how to make a rigger's belt, and we'll actually sit down and do the calculation to figure out how much thread I need. Oh, if you got any questions or comments, please leave them below. I try to answer them all, and hope you liked the video. Look forward to making the next video. See you then.